What's up, everybody? Welcome back to part 2 of Lady Justice. If you haven't watched part 1 of this episode, you should go check that out before you continue watching this. Of course, more spoilers ahead. You can find a list of the stories discussed here in the description below. Please like the video, subscribe to my channel for more, and maybe share it with some other people that like Malifaux. But let's pick up where we left off. Lady Justice approaches a cemetery at night. She can hear the voices in her head that have spoken to her since the event happened. She sees the head of a ram and the head of a raven that appear to be in a struggle against each other, as the voices tell her how to dispense justice. She finds two men who are in the process of robbing a grave and confronts them. One draws a pistol and she dispatches him quickly before taking the other one under arrest. Lady Justice receives a mysterious note from someone purporting to be an old friend and requesting to meet her at an old factory in the quarantine zone. Justice is suspicious, as she does not have any friends, and assumes it will be a trap, but heads out anyway. As she enters the abandoned factory, she clicks the hard heel of her boot against the ground and uses the sounds to sense her surroundings. She is cautious and makes her way deeper into the building, trying to stick to tight, confined areas where she will have an advantage in a fight. As she moves into a more open room, she starts to sense corruption, and suddenly there's a loud crack from above her, and energy bolts start raining down on her. She takes cover and defends herself from the attacker who's on a walkway above her. She sees two other figures further into the room, but they appear to be preoccupied fighting each other. She maneuvers until the attacker gets to the right position, and then destroys one of the supports holding the walkway, causing the attacker to fall to the floor, and she hears the sounds of bones breaking. She runs over to the injured person and demands to know who they are working for, but immediately hears a scream as a hooded figure rushes towards her, and she quickly puts her blade to their throat. Then she notices Sonia Crid and Perdita Ortega approaching from the other side of the room. They're surprised to see each other, but turn their attention towards the hooded figure and demand to know what this was all about. As they reveal the hooded figure's identity, all three women recognize her as a woman who had recently tried to join up with each of their organizations. They question her, and she explains that these women took everything from her. She used to have children and a husband who was a high-ranking guild official, but he was caught selling secrets to the Arcanists, Resurrectionists, and even the Neverborn. When the guild found out, they sent Perdita, Sonia, and Lady Justice, and the woman's house was burned down, killing her husband and children. She begs them to end her life, but Perdita promises her that she will not be killed, and makes Sonia and Lady Justice agree before leaving to return home. Sonia asks if the woman would still like to work for her hunting Arcanists, and Lady Justice is concerned as she does not agree with Sonia's techniques for turning people into witchling stalkers, but she also knows that they can't let a known Resurrectionist sympathizer go free. After the Governor General dies, Lady Justice expects that the Resurrectionists will take advantage of the situation to launch an attack against the guild. She starts preparing and one day receives word of a large Resurrectionist force moving against the city, and she leads all the military forces of the guild against them. However, the undead forces are surprisingly numerous and the battle goes poorly, until suddenly one of the Resurrectionist flanks collapses, seemingly being defeated by a different force and allowing the guild to win the battle. Lady Justice recognizes the tactics used by the Necromancer as being the same one who she faced at the observatory when she almost died. Lady Justice defeats a low-level necromancer in the basement of a factory whose force included a three-headed amalgamation. Lady Justice recognizes that this creature could not have been the creation of this necromancer, and that it also does not match the MO of any of the other known resurrectionists, but she thinks she knows who is responsible. She returns to her office and looks over a map of the city that has pins representing necromancer activity. The jury comes in and asks her about the map, and she explains that all of the high-level necromancers have distinctive characteristics that make it easy to tell when they are involved. She goes on to explain that there is one necromancer who has remained hidden, and she suspects that this was the person responsible for the recent attack against the guild. She points out that she was surprised to see how many corpses the necromancer had access to, and the jury suggests that this person might be an undertaker. Lady Justice sends marshals out to investigate all of the morgues and cemeteries in the city, and when one of them does not report back, she personally goes to look into it. When they arrive, they inspect the graves and find that all of the bodies are missing. They also find that the owner of this particular morgue is connected with several others throughout the city. As they are discussing the situation, a woman approaches, claiming to want to leave flowers for her dead grandmother, and after asking her a few questions, she points them towards a warehouse that the undertaker owns. Unbeknownst to Lady Justice, this woman is actually Chiaki, who was sent there by Yan Lo, who is arranging a showdown between Lady Justice and Nicodem. Lady Justice walks into a break room at the Guild Enclave to find Sonia and Perdita talking to each other. Perdita makes a comment about her new short haircut, and Lady J explains that she did it in solidarity for Sonia, who lost most of her hair. Perdita looks a bit uncomfortable, and Sonia thanks Justice for her kindness. Lady J says that everyone is glad that she's back, except for maybe the judge, who has been winning all of the poker games without her. Perdita interrupts and is surprised that they have poker games, as she has not been invited. The two other women begin making excuses, and it comes out that Sonia was supposed to have invited Perdita, but did not. Perdita is hurt and tells Sonia she thought they were friends. Sonia replies that they are more like co-workers, and Perdita storms out, yelling profanities in Spanish. Justice helps herself to some breakfast and explains to Sonia that she has been ordered by the Governor General to participate in an interview with the Malifaux Tattler, but she is not looking forward to it. She leaves and decides to keep herself busy with some menial work to try to avoid the interview. She grabs a low-priority file from her desk and sees that she needs to go speak to Dr. McMorning. After checking for him in the morgue, she tracks him back to that same break room and finds him fidgeting with an icebox that appears to have a severed head inside. He starts blabbering excuses as to why he has it, and she asks him about a discrepancy in his paperwork relating to some dead bodies. He takes the paperwork and accidentally drops it in a puddle of coffee and stammers out an excuse about how it's his assistant's fault. He continues to mutter on, and Lady Justice takes the file and leaves. Later that day, she finds herself back in that same break room for her interview, sitting down with Nellie Cochran. Nellie makes small talk, but Lady Justice is impatient and asks her to get on with it. Nellie drones on about the history of the Death Marshals, using very flowery language, apparently plotting out her story in her head. Lady Justice interrupts and asks if she needs to be here for this, and Nellie insists. She points out that there are rumors about Lady Justice and asks her if she used to be a resurrectionist. Lady Justice slams her fist on the table and yells at the woman, and Nellie apologizes and says she will start with something easier. She asks what her name was before she went by Lady Justice, and Justice responds that she won't tell her. Nellie then decides to ask her about her co-workers and asks if Justice and the judge are in a relationship and if they plan to get married. Lady Justice is outraged at the question and storms out of the room. Earlier, Governor General Marlowe calls Lady Justice into his office. He questions the effectiveness of Lady Justice's department and accuses the Death Marshals of being undead themselves. Lady Justice denies this and defends her department's performance, saying that they saved the city from the undead. The Governor General responds that it's more like a civil war between two different undead factions. However, Marlowe does grant that Lady Justice has at least maintained the respect of the citizens of Malifaux, whereas Sonia Crid is viewed as a sanctioned domestic terrorist. Lady Justice is about to defend Sonia, but Marlowe continues, explaining that he has sent for the Domodores de Cadavres from Earthside, who will be coming to Malifaux to perform a ritual that they believe will banish the grave spirit and end necromantic magic for good. She points out that the Domodores are in fact necromancers, and Marlowe responds that this wouldn't be the first time he employed such a person. He goes on to explain that the final task for her division will be to protect the Domodores so that they can carry out their ritual, and that after that she will become the poster child for the guild in a PR campaign, and she is to take an interview with the Malifaux Tattler to have it ready to be published as soon as the Domodores have finished. Lady Justice stomps out of the room angrily, and she bumps into McMorning, who is conspicuously standing just outside Marlowe's door. Later, the judge reports back from a failed mission to capture a resurrectionist known as the Reaper in the quarantine zone. Lady Justice fills him in on the conversation with Marlowe, and the judge points out that most resurrectionists seem to be laying low lately, possibly preparing for another attack, and he suspects that they may even know about Marlowe's plan. 2 weeks later, Lady Justice meets the Domodores at a train station to escort them back to the Guild Enclave. She is surprised to find that they are not crazy and erratic like most necromancers, but are instead well dressed in colorful outfits and move and speak with grace and poise. When they return to the Enclave, Lady Justice brings them to an old abandoned library, and they begin their ritual, circling around a cauldron and chanting in Spanish as they fill it with soulstones. Soon after, Lady Justice hears gunshots in the distance and knows the Enclave is under attack. She is tempted to rush to the action, but resists and sticks to her post, defending the Domodores. She can tell by the movement of the attackers that they are using tactics, which is unusual for the undead, and she knows that her mystery resurrectionist is here. As the fighting gets closer, Lady Justice and her Death Marshals open fire on the undead approaching through the nearby hallway. They cut down the first wave, and suddenly Lady Justice sees Dr. McMorning looking bloody and confused. She grabs the man and pulls him into the library, telling him to stay quiet and not touch anything. As she returns to the hallway to continue her defense, she hears screams from inside the library as zombies try to dig their way through the walls and ceiling to make it to the Domodores. As she turns to combat this new threat, she sees Seamus down the hall and catches her first glimpse of Nicodem. They close the door to the library, but it is soon beaten down by a hulking flesh construct, and Seamus enters the room, firing a close-range shot at Lady Justice's head and only barely missing. Just then, one of the Domodores speaks up and says that the ritual is complete, as a wave of energy irradiates from the cauldron, and every zombie it touches collapses. It also deprives Lady Justice of her supernatural senses, and she is once again fully blind. Seamus yells encouragement in McMorning's direction as he and Nicodem retreat, since they are suddenly outnumbered. As Lady Justice gathers herself, McMorning mumbles something to her under his breath, and as she goes to ask him what he said, he suddenly draws a scalpel and attacks the nearest Domodore. Lady Justice draws her sword and tries to defend them, but she is surprised to see how nimble McMorning is as he avoids her blows. He is able to kill more of the Domodores before Lady Justice lands a slash across his chest. As he recoils, he throws a scalpel at her, hitting her in the arm and causing her to drop her sword. She seizes one of the soul soul stones and uses it to heal herself, but at the same time McMorning grabs the cauldron and tips it over, and suddenly Lady Justice's senses return to her. She turns to continue her assault on McMorning, but all of the undead bodies begin reanimating, and he is able to escape in the chaos. Lady Justice is contemplating McMorning's treachery as she cradles her arm that is still sore from his attack. Lucius approaches her office, and Lady Justice is frustrated, telling him that she is not in the mood for gloating. He responds, "Neither am I," and sits down. He explains that the two of them are in a similar situation, being on Governor General Marlowe's bad side, and now having to constantly be second-guessed and deal with bureaucracy when they used to have free reign. Lady Justice points out that Marlowe still acts like he's on Earth and doesn't understand the nature of the resurrectionist threat in Malifaux. To Lady Justice's surprise, Lucius gives a rare bit of praise to her and her department, and he says that they just need a big victory to prove their worth to the people of the city. He slides a folder to her across the desk, and she is immediately suspicious, asking if there will be strings attached if he helps her. He assures her that he simply wants to help her fight the resurrectionists, as it seems that Marlowe won't. She opens the folder and finds a surveillance report on the warehouse that they recently found linked to the mystery resurrectionists. Lucius points out that the warehouse is connected to the Katanaka Trading Company. However, someone was observed leaving there that matches the necromancer's description, and he was tracked back to a mansion in the slums. Before Lady Justice can respond, Lucius is gone. Lady Justice brings her death marshals, as well as Daciel and some guild guard, to assault the mansion. They hit it with several firebombs, and Lady Justice asks Daciel to order the guard to charge into the house and flush out the resurrectionists. Daciel is hesitant as he thinks it's a suicide mission, and he and Lady Justice start threatening each other and have a stare down as their subordinates look on with apprehension. Daciel backs down, stating that he doesn't get paid enough to care, and orders his men into the building. Meanwhile, Lady Justice and the judge move to ambush the fleeing resurrectionists. They make their way to a nearby graveyard, assuming that the resurrectionists will head there for reinforcements. They cover several of the graves with barbed wire to slow down any undead that may be raised, and soon hear someone emerging from the sewers. The death marshals start firing, and Lady Justice charges towards the sound of the noise, intending to kill the necromancer before they can overwhelm her with numbers. As she advances ahead of her men, one of the undead creates a fissure in the ground, which throws her off balance, and the undead manages to hit her with a pickaxe before the judge shoots it in the head just in the nick of time. Justice heals herself, and the judge asks if she'd like to regroup with the men, but she insists they push on. As she cuts her way through several more undead, she sees the necromancer trying to flee, and she yells to him that guild law requires that she ask him to surrender, and the judge points out that the law does not require that they accept his surrender. Nicodem snickers, and Lady Justice senses something wrong as she turns towards her death marshals as they fire their pistols at their allies, one of them grazing Lady Justice in the face, and the other hitting the judge in the back of the head. The death marshals struggle against Nicodem's power, as they are partially undead, and he is only able to exert some control over them. In a rage, she charges at the necromancer as he uses his magic to decay the flesh on her bones, but she is able to fight through it, and she slashes at him, cutting his prosthetic leg from his body. She reaches into her pocket to find only one of her soul stones still charged, and she kisses it, recognizing that it got its power from the judge's death, before using it to heal herself. She orders her death marshals to take the judge's body and retreat, fearing that they will still be a liability. As she advances toward Nicodem's prone body, he raises a hand towards her, but she quickly lops it off with her sword. He tells her that what she's doing will not stop him, as he has been to the land of the dead before, and he is a king there. She lifts her sword in a reverse grip and plunges it into his chest, twisting the blade. Once she is satisfied that he's dead, she cuts his body up into little pieces to prevent it from being risen, and takes his head as she returns to her men. Lady Justice returns from an operation and is arguing with Daciel. She yells at him for failing to send the reinforcements she requested, which led to several of her death marshals being killed. Daciel claims that he didn't receive the reinforcement request and that she needs to fill out the proper paperwork, especially since there's a personnel shortage. Lady Justice gets angry at him, and when he mentions the judge, things almost get violent, but they're interrupted by a messenger who tells them both that Governor General Marlowe would like to see them. They head to Marlowe's office and continue their argument in front of the Governor General, and Daciel points out that Lady Justice needs a new judge so that she can stay on top of her paperwork. Justice is once again enraged that he mentioned the judge's name, but manages to keep her cool, and Marlowe agrees with Daciel, telling Lady J that she needs a new judge. She heads down to a training area where a supervisor is training 3 new death marshals. They struggle to maintain a defensive line against several training constructs, and the supervisor decides to demonstrate on her own, as she single-handedly cuts down each of the hulking constructs. As the trainees are looking on impressed, Lady Justice approaches and dismisses them, asking to speak to the supervisor. Justice tells the woman that she she has sacrificed much for the guild, but that she would ask her to sacrifice a bit more, and she asks her to become the new judge, which requires her to sacrifice her name and identity. When the woman agrees, Lady Justice tells her to get ready, as they have an important operation coming up. A few days later, Lady Justice and the new judge take several death marshals to an old abandoned school building. Some street kids had reported to them that some kind of necromancer had recently taken up shop here, and Lady Justice suspects it's McMorning, the traitor. Justice and one of the death marshals head down one section of the building, as the judge takes the remainder of the marshals down the other. They search for the science labs, as Lady Justice suspects that's where McMorning would be hiding. As they get closer, Lady Justice senses decay, and she notices that the walls are covered in an embalming fluid. She senses there may be a trap, and sends the only death marshal with her to warn the judge to be wary of the walls. She makes it to the back of that section alone, and opens the door to one of the science labs. She finds McMorning standing over a table that has a body on it. As she enters, he uncovers the body, and she recognizes it as the corpse of the original judge and her lover. She charges at McMorning, but he quickly tips the table over, knocking the body onto the floor, and dodges her attack. He explains to her that he is fascinated with her eyes, and intends to dissect them to learn how her senses work. He then picks up a device and pushes a button, and an explosion goes off, catching Lady Justice by surprise and knocking her against the table. He approaches her unmoving body, but as he reaches out to her, she springs towards him and slashes him in the arm. He scrambles to heal himself with a potion, and then tells Lady Justice that he thinks it's time for a reunion, as the body on the floor stands up, and the corpse of the judge begins speaking to Lady Justice. She pulls her pistol and points it at his face, but hesitates, as she still recognizes him as the judge she used to know. She feels fear for the first time in a long time. He inches closer to her as he taunts her, but Lady Justice finally steels herself, holsters her pistol and draws her sword, swinging it at the judge's head. However, he parries with his own sword, and blocks several more of her attacks, seemingly knowing exactly what she's gonna do before she does it. Finally, she feints another sword swipe, but instead kicks him in the knee, throwing him off balance, giving her an opening to strike, and she cuts off his head with one slash. McMorning, who had watched this whole encounter to this point, takes this opportunity to run away, and Lady Justice gives chase. But as she returns to the rest of the school, she notices that a battle is waging between a group of undead and the judge and her marshals, and they appear to be losing. She takes one last look at McMorning as he flees, but decides to go help her friends instead of giving chase. When they return to the guild enclave, they begin unloading the dead and wounded bodies. Daciel notices that they have once again failed to secure McMorning, and starts to gloat until he notices just how bad the carnage has been. He takes a second to reconsider, and then turns to the judge, and tells her that next time they go after McMorning, they shouldn't bother doing any paperwork, as he intends to bring the full force of the guild down on him. So that's it for Lady Justice. She's definitely one of the more interesting characters. I think she really epitomizes the problems with the guild. She has some very worthy goals, but is sort of willing to go too far to reach them. It's also interesting because she's one of the characters that goes through the most change throughout the story. But anyway, I hope you liked this breakdown. If you did, please do me a favor and consider sharing it with someone else who you think might enjoy it. It would really help keep the channel going. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe if you haven't, and thanks for watching.